Have you hit the subscribe button yet, YouTubers? I'm going to keep these intros short. All we want you to do is hit subscribe, tell your friends, sit back, relax, and let's talk some fantasy football. Well, we have got a lot to discuss. If you thought the upsets were going to stop in Week 9, welcome to Week 10. The Miami Dolphins beating the Baltimore Ravens on Thursday night in a very surprising game. No catches for Mike Gesicki. Didn't even matter. An injury to the starting quarterback got the other starting quarterback back in. There's a lot to talk about. A right guard caught a touchdown pass. It was probably the play of the year, and it didn't even count. And really, that's just a small headline today because we got to talk about Beckham again. We got to talk with Dave. He was on the podcast yesterday. We got to talk about Cam Newton. We haven't discussed that. And starter sit for 6 NFC home games. Dave, wild game last night, sort of, in a way.
It was a game where fantasy points went to die. Unless you had Mark Andrews or Rashad Bateman. And then you were probably feeling okay about stuff. But Lamar Jackson was just under duress. You could tell that he was spooked from that pass rush. Marquis Brown had a couple of drops. Sammy Watkins lost the ball in the lights, I guess. I don't know what happened on that very first drive, that deep ball that he had. Freeman, I thought, looked okay. He just didn't get enough run. Le'Veon Bell looked like a word I can't say on the pod. And Dolphins, I think we're done with Myles Gaskin here, aren't we?
Jamie, are we done with Myles Gaskin?
I mean, it's so hard to get away from somebody getting so much work, and they get the Jets this week. So I would say no, but it's frustrating. You know, you like to see him convert the touchdown at the end. You'd like to see not one of his offensive linemen steal a screen pass from him. That was the craziest play I've ever seen. Robert Hunt looking very fresh. Give the Dolphins coaching staff all the credit in the world for that defensive game plan. I saw this tweet from Next Gen Stats. So Javon Holland and Brandon Jones, they blitzed combined 38 times, 21 times for Holland, 17 times for Jones. The two safeties blitzed more times than any defensive back in a game in the Next Gen Stats era, which dates back to 2016.
Wow.
So they just threw everything at Lamar Jackson, and his offensive line fell apart. He was flustered. It's the fewest points scored in his time as a starter for the Ravens. It was just an unbelievable performance by the Dolphins defense. And I'll tell you what, we can beat the waiver wire story show now. The most added player, unit, whatever you want to describe them, is going to be the Dolphins defense going into the Week 11 matchup against the New York Jets.
Well, we'll see if the Jets have another good offensive performance.
I don't care. Why
not?
That defense is finally getting healthy, and they look like the unit that we thought we were going to see at the beginning of the season.
All right. Is that based on one game, or am I missing something?
Well, the Houston game also, but that's more of the Houston offense as well. But they're getting healthy. I mean, remember, they missed Howard and Jones for stretch. Linebackers were beat up. Christian Wilkins looks like he's playing well again. But the coaching staff, there was some question about who was calling plays last night for the Dolphins. If Brian Flores was making the defensive calls.
It looked like
Armando Salguero used to cover the Dolphins for the Herald. He's now with Outkick. He said it looked like Flores was the one calling plays. And so if there was a change and you saw a change, again, good matchup next week.
Going into the game last night, the Dolphins were number 4 in the league over the last 3 weeks. This sounds like an Azer stat, but it's not, in pressure rate. So they've been trying to generate pressure on quarterbacks for the last 3 weeks, and they really just the door broke down and they came in on the Ravens.
All right, that's some other things to talk about in this game. Tavon Young, another defensive back for the Ravens, another injury. They're pretty beat up in the secondary, but more importantly, Myles Gaskin. Yeah, it was an ugly game for Myles Gaskin, but he did get a lot of work near the goal line. He had a couple of almost touchdowns. He sort of scored on a play that was called back on a false start. Not sure he would have scored if, I think the Ravens kind of stopped playing.
I think on that drive, they had 4 different offensive linemen called for penalties.
Wow. So 14 carries, 1 catch. And and again, I mean, the big deal here is that without Malcolm Brown on the field, he is the goal line back. So he almost got in a couple times in this game.
He's the goal line back that has 0 goal line touchdowns.
I know, but he's only been the goal line back for 4 games. But
we need to find another running back, a couple of receivers, because we know the tight end. The tight end is Tyler Higbee, who's getting the most red zone, end zone opportunities. And Myles Gaskin is probably the running back that we'd look at least one of them. Who are the other guys? You'll think about that for next show.
Well, honestly, Dalvin Cook, right? Like Dalvin Cook just cannot score this year, and last week especially was really frustrating for him. Chase Edmonds, I think, was that guy.
You mean just him not scoring?
Not scoring, but yeah, I guess Edmonds wasn't really getting goal line work. But Cook, how many times did he almost score in week 9? And then receivers, I don't know.
I'm looking up something here. Hold on. Let me go into the laboratory, Adam, and see if I can find some players who have been close to scoring this year.
Okay. So, all right, let's do another topic here. Jamie,
go for a second.
Jamie, Rashad Bateman was good, especially down the stretch, and Marquis Brown did not have a good game. He had some drops. He's not making contested catches, or at least he didn't last night. Very frustrating, but he got a ton of targets. What do you make of it?
I'll throw this game out for him. I think a couple things happened for Rashad Bateman. Heard from somebody that I trust that Bateman is not going to come off the field in favor of Sammy Watkins. I don't know what the snap count was from last night, but Watkins did not help himself with the drop, as Dave referenced, and then clearly the fumble. Questionable fumble, obviously, but it still happened nonetheless. And so the nice thing is that Bateman, most of it was garbage time with the 2 long catches in the fourth quarter, but showed you that he's still a big part of this passing attack. And so I think you just kind of throw this game out. We'll see what happens with the Ravens coming off their game next week. I saw one of the Ravens beat writers write that, how the Ravens have just been living dangerously for the last several weeks, and they finally got caught. So maybe there's a little bit of a refocus, retooling on how they're approaching things, not, getting ahead in games as opposed to, trying to put themselves in these furious comebacks. But Lamar's going to be fine. The run game is now a bigger question to me. Like Dave said, Freeman ran well, but he didn't, I think, do enough to sort of separate himself from where maybe Latavius Murray is when he comes back. And, Brown, I'm not worried about. Bateman, I'm encouraged about.
Okay, so Bateman played 55% of the snaps. Sammy was in for 32% of the snaps. And Bateman really came alive on the final drive. You could tell that Lamar was looking for him, especially near the goal line. The pass that was intercepted, I believe that was targeted for Rashad Bateman. So I wonder if this is where Bateman really jumps off now.
It's also, though, just based on that game, there was a lot of times where Marquis Brown was lined up on the right side, which is where Xavier Howard is, and Bateman was on the left side, which is where Byron Jones is. If you're going to go at somebody in the Dolphins, you're going to go at Byron Jones more so than you are Xavier Howard.
Okay. And then you guys were looking for a wide receiver that's played a lot inside the 5-yard line but has no touchdowns. This is interesting. 30 snaps inside the 5-yard line for Van Jefferson this year, 0 touchdowns.
That might not change going forward. All right, so that's your recap of Miami 22 and Baltimore 10. And it was fun. It was fun to see Tua come in. And he's another guy that people might be picking up for the matchup next week against the Jets. 51% rostered. Jets, Carolina, Giants. Not the best schedule after that. And then there's a bye. Okay, a couple things I want to promote. First of all, CBS Sports HQ, 10 a.m. Eastern on Sunday morning until 1 p.m. 3 hours of fantasy football advice. There's gambling. There's insider access, to reporters who are covering the games. And there's just great stuff that's going to help you set your lineup and win your league. Watch CBS Sports HQ. You get the CBS Sports app. Get it on your Roku, your whatever, Apple TV, Amazon Fire. Get it on your phone. Or go to cbssportshq.com if you want to just check it out. And we've got a Fantasy Football Today DFS podcast. So if you're into DFS or you want to get into DFS, Mike McClure and Sia Najad join Frank Stampfel twice a week to give you all the best daily fantasy advice for your FanDuel, DraftKings lineups, etc. Want to win some money? Check out the Fantasy Football Today DFS podcast anywhere you listen to FFT. Dave, I got a real quick email of the day just for you. It's from Joe in Wilmington, North Carolina. Joe writes in, I think this was yesterday, by the way. 10 years ago, Dave wished me happy 40th, wondering if my brother in our shared love of pizza could wish me a happy 50th. It has been a good decade, and I was hoping to keep this rolling. So can you give Joe from Wilmington, North Carolina, a happy birthday wish, belated?
Joe and everybody else that's turning 50, happy birthday. 10 years ago, I was 35, and I was still making huge mistakes on which quarterback was going to be good on Thursday night. You can tell where my head's at right now. Happy birthday. Keep chowing down pizza while you can.
Happy birthday.
10 years ago, he was in 9 leagues, but now he's 50. He's only in 1 league. So, all right, come on. Let's.
10 years ago, I think I was in 9 leagues too, and now I'm in 16.
There you go.
So I've gone the exact opposite direction as Joe.
I got 3 quick questions for you as we get into the AFC, not just the NFC home game, sorry, but the entire slate. Which I always ask you about replacement running backs. I'm not sure if this is the week really, but got a good report just this morning about Ramondre Stevenson as he's looking like he's going to go. So, Jamie, you can start. Which replacement running backs do you like this week?
Well, I mean, assuming that the starters are out, we'll throw James Conner out of the equation because clearly he's a different category. But Dearness Johnson would be one. We got, limited practice for Zach Moss. So Devin Singletary, you got to be a little bit concerned now that Moss is going to play. But obviously, if Moss is out, Singletary being a great spot. If Alvin Kamara is out, I think Mark Ingram's a top 20 running back this week. And then Ramondre Stevenson's borderline top 24 guy, just with the hope he's going to get the majority of the work if Damian Harris doesn't play. So those would be the group that you're looking at there.
Yeah, and I think, what are we thinking about Daryl Williams right now with Clyde Edwards-Helaire potentially playing? Have we heard anything?
Yeah, I mean, Eric Bieniemy, their offensive coordinator, said he looked great in the first practice, but I'm going to guess the Chiefs are going to be cautious with it. So, those are the two we're waiting on, Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Chris Carson. So we'll find out if they're going to play this week. Daryl Williams is, in my opinion, a better spot than Alex Collins, but Collins is still a flex play. And I guess the other one to mention would be if Carlos Hyde does start in place of James Robinson for whatever reason. Robinson's trending in the right direction, but Carlos Hyde, as we said yesterday, would be a borderline flex.
Okay. Dave, wide receivers, let's say people are nervous about starting DJ Moore or something like that, or
like me.
Yeah, I don't know. Or whatever. Any wide receivers you found yourself particularly high on that you might have picked up off waivers over the last few weeks?
I don't know if I've picked up Marvin Jones off the waiver wire, but I kind of like his matchup against Indianapolis. They've really been bad, specifically against outside wide receivers. So I wonder if there's a chance for Marvin Jones to have a good game. Cole Beasley last week was terrible in non-PPR. He was decent in full PPR. Again, not somebody that you can find off the waiver wire. You might be asking for somebody a little bit deeper than that. So why don't I go deeper? Donovan Peoples-Jones in the matchup against the Patriots, always a threat to reel in a deep ball, but I think he's more than just a deep ball guy. Maybe the headliner is Tyler Johnson, because we know that Antonio Brown not going to play, Gronk not going to play, Godwin didn't practice on Thursday. We don't know if he's going to end up playing, even if he does practice on Friday. Tyler Johnson's in line for a lot of work, and he's a good receiver that can line up anywhere on the field, and it's a great matchup against Washington. So I like him. I think fantasy managers can still get their hands on Jamal Agnew. Same thing as what I said for Marvin Jones, just the opportunity to get some passes sent his way against Indianapolis. And then you've got two guys in Atlanta, and Russell Gage and Tajay Sharp, who might be just like serviceable 1 week replacements. I don't know if I'm starting any of these guys over DJ Moore, by the way, but these are all receivers that are out there where if you're in a pinch because of buys or, because of Chris Godwin, you can gravitate toward them.
Yeah. One more, James Washington, just with the opportunity of Chase Claypool not playing. Claypool for the season's averaging just over 7 targets per game. And so we'll see where Roethlisberger goes, but it's a great matchup against Detroit.
Okay, and Tyler Johnson is 3% rostered right now.
Great Godwin, daily play too.
They're hopeful. Yeah, save some money. They're hopeful that Godwin will practice today, but as Dave said, even if he practices, does not mean he will play. So Tyler Johnson, take a look at him if you need a wide receiver. And which player are you most nervous about starting? Is this just the DJ Moore segment? Because I can't get DJ Moore out of my lineup, unfortunately. But I think it's a pretty solid matchup if he can just get competent quarterback play. Although one thing I've noticed about Arizona is they're pretty damn good against number 1 receivers. It's the other guys that usually get them, but that doesn't really exist on Carolina, I don't think. Anyway, which player are you most nervous about starting?
Cortland Sutton, if people are still starting him across the board. You've seen now the 3-game sample size where Jerry Judy has played 2.5 of those games. Clearly he finished. The targets are down, the production's down. Now you're facing an Eagles defense that takes away the big play. So Cortland Sutton's one of the most, guys that concern me the most.
How about a guy that we're going to start him anyway, but TJ Hawkinson lining up against the Steelers makes me nervous. I know that Cole Kmet is coming off of a nice game against Pittsburgh on Monday. He was the second tight end all year to get more than 8 half PPR fantasy points against the Pittsburgh Steelers. So I'm just wondering, like, is this going to be another matchup where the defense knows going in, Hawkinson's the top target, let's take him away in obvious passing situations, force Jared Goff to throw to St. Brown or Khalif Raymond or whoever they dig up to be the number 2 option in the pass game?
I guess it depends on like how many targets you expect Hawkinson to get, because they've only faced 2 tight ends that have gotten more than 7 targets. One was Waller. He got 11 PPR points, which is obviously not good. And then Kmet being one of the others. Robert Tonyan was the third.
I can't make a good case to start Antonio Gibson. I just a terrible matchup.
He's a running back with a pulse. So I think he qualifies as at worst a number 3 running back.
Yeah. Okay. That's it. I want to update everybody on the Twitter poll that we had yesterday relating to Carson Wentz, who said he's going to play even if his wife gives birth on Sunday, and she's due, I think, on Sunday. If you were a starting NFL quarterback and your wife was giving birth on Sunday, would you play this week? What do you think won? Yes, I'm playing, or no, I'll be with my wife?
Yes, I'm playing.
Dave, what do you think won? Yeah,
I think yes, I'm playing is what won your poll.
Come on, guys. We got sensitive, caring husbands out there. 67% said no, I'll be with my wife.
Wow.
That's in the minority. How about that?
That's where I'd be, because otherwise I wouldn't be let back in my house after the football game.
I once asked my wife, I said, if the Miami Hurricanes were playing in the national championship and I had tickets to the game and I were already out there and you went into labor, would I have to come back? And, it didn't go over well. I should have.
Did you have to come back?
Yeah. Like, let's say I was at the game, I was like, I traveled, I'm already there. I'm going to go watch the game. And I'm in labor. Do I have to leave?
I mean, I almost had a similar situation, not for a team that I like, but for my job, because I was covering the Super Bowl in Minnesota, and we were 3 weeks out from our due date. And so we were trying to figure out, what's going to happen. I was talking to people at work. They're like, yeah, just go back. You're fine.
Oh, yeah, for sure. But that's not your team playing in the national championship. I mean, come on, we have real priorities here.
We're being a starting.
But mine was actually realistic, though.
Yeah. Okay, the Rams signed Odell Beckham. Let's get to the news and notes. Now, we did a whole bonus pod on it, but I guess I should have asked, and I didn't. Who do you like better rest of season? Just to get this out there, Woods or Beckham?
Woods by a lot.
Woods.
Okay. Dave, what's your take on it? The whole thing.
I think it's a dumb move. I'm not sure why they did it.
Come on, what's wrong about adding Beckham?
So Van Jefferson and Odell Beckham had very similar ADOTs, very similar average route depths, and Van Jefferson was more explosive. He had more yards after catch per reception, like 2 yards more than Odell Beckham this year. He had more explosive plays than Beckham. And so my initial thought was, why did they just acquire someone who is an older version of Van Jefferson? Which sounds kind of, ugly when you think about Odell Beckham.
Those numbers were Cleveland Beckham?
Yeah, this year with Cleveland. But yeah, I don't think it's an apples to oranges discussion when we're talking about ADOT and route depth, unless the Rams have a completely different view of how they are going to use Odell.
So
but that got my mind
on with the Giants, though.
I don't know. Who cares? That's ancient history.
Well,
what I'm wondering is
something he could do, though.
What did you say? Was ADOT with the Giants?
Right. I mean, what was his ADOT at LSU? I don't know if that matters either.
Well, I mean, there's still things that he could do. That's I don't know what McVay's thinking, but I'm just wondering if they're not going to use him the same way the Browns did, because the Browns misused him.
Okay, so that sent my mind to a different spot, which is maybe he's not taking Van Jefferson off the field, and if he's not there to replace Van Jefferson, he's definitely not replacing Cooper Kupp. Is there a possibility that he's there to add more explosiveness to the offense and move Robert Woods into a role where he's not on the field as much? And so
you think they acquired Odell Beckham to take Robert Woods off the field?
That's not what I'm going to say.
Okay.
I think Odell is there. I think Cooper Kupp's role is locked in, and I think his targets are locked in too. If I had Kupp on my teams, I wouldn't be worried. But I bet that they're going to rotate 3 guys for 2 spots every single game. So Woods will play the most, at least to start, but I bet we'll see some 3 receiver sets where it's Kupp, Beckham, and Jefferson. They're going to mix in. My guess, this is my guess, is that they're going to mix and match those 3 guys. And I think it lowers it a little bit for Woods. I still like him better. If I had to make a choice on, keeping or cutting Woods and Beckham, I only have one spot for him. I would keep Woods ahead of Beckham. But I'm a little concerned that Robert Woods might not get quite the same target volume or have as many opportunities to make huge plays. And we've already kind of seen it from a point this year where Robert Woods wasn't making, a ton of explosive plays earlier in the season. He's bounced back. He's made more explosive plays than Van Jefferson this year overall. But I'm wondering if that's part of the reason why they got Odell Beckham, is not necessarily to replace a guy, but to just add more explosiveness to their offense.
Okay, so again, please listen to the bonus pod that we did. Heath's a little worried that everybody's going to lose a little bit. I think Jamie is not as worried about certainly Cooper Kupp. And Stafford obviously is a winner. But, I think Jamie said basically Van Jefferson is going to get replaced, right? I mean, that's kind of what you think?
Yes, Jefferson is the biggest loser of all this by far.
Okay. And then as far as Cam Newton goes, guys, first of all, a 2 QB league, is he... Well, everyone who's a starting quarterback is a must add. But do you think he's going to be worth using? You think he's going to actually put up decent fantasy points in a 2 QB context?
I mean, what he's going to do with his legs, as long as he's healthy. And we had Ryan Wilson on FFT yesterday on HQ. And Ryan, brought up the point of that on top of, the vaccination story with Cam Newton and maybe why he didn't get signed earlier or brought in earlier is now that, he's taken some time away from the game, shoulder healthy, foot healthy, maybe as close to 100% as he's been in the last several years. And that you might be getting the closest version to the best version of Cam Newton that we've seen, since maybe 2018, 2019. So I hope that he'll run enough. I hope that he'll lean on his weapons enough. I hope the offensive line will be good enough based on what we've seen the last, several weeks, that he's got that in him. So it's just a matter of what your expectations are and who you're starting him over. But first week against Washington, we know that defense is certainly beatable. There's some, questionable matchups, I think, after the bye week, but prior to the bye week, their byes in week 14, he has a chance to give you a few good games. So I don't have a problem. He should be picked up in obviously all super flex and 2 QB leagues, but even in some deeper 1 QB leagues, he might be a good bye week replacement.
Okay.
And Kyler and Mahomes have byes in week 12. Wentz and Ertz have bye weeks in week 14. Do we still think the Dolphins defense is a good matchup? Because that's who Cam has in week 12. He's got Atlanta in week 14.
Fair point.
If I have any of the quarterbacks I just named, Murray, Mahomes, Wentz, Ertz, and I don't have a good backup quarterback already, I'm going to make a play for Cam now, and I'll evaluate him in week 11, week 10 if he plays, and maybe use him as my bye week guy for my stud quarterback.
DJ Moore value has to go up, right? But significantly?
Well, I mean, I don't think he's going to get worse than what he's been the last, 4 or 5 weeks. The hope would be is what he showed you in the first 3 weeks of the season. And that, I hope the correlation, more so than the quarterback play, is just McCaffrey being back on the field and giving him a little bit of a breather with, focus elsewhere. I mean, the one that should fluctuate the most, hopefully, would be Robbie Anderson. That Cam can get him going to whatever extent is. And maybe PJ Walker does. I mean, clearly there's a disconnect between Sam Darnold and Robbie Anderson if you watched the game last week and saw the sideline antics. Those two guys were not on the same page by any stretch. So
Adam Gase was like, ha, 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 ha.
Hopefully it's a Robbie Anderson. It's a quarterback problem, and Cam addresses the quarterback problem. Hopefully PJ Walker addresses the quarterback problem for Robbie Anderson. If you have Robbie Anderson, you've been holding him all this time, don't drop him. Just see what happens after a week or two.
All right, Robert Woods or DJ Moore rest of season?
Woods still.
I think I would go with Woods.
As a Christian McCaffrey manager, I will breathe a little bit of a sigh of relief. I just think I was just worried about them having just a miserable offense. I know at least Cam has a track record of giving McCaffrey 100 catches back in 2018. So, I just, not that I was all that nervous, but I guess I was nervous that he was going to be more like RB5 and not RB1. I think this gives him a little bit better chance to be the Christian McCaffrey we drafted him to be. Okay, let's get to the news and notes. There's a lot of it here. And okay, we've got we've got Alvin Kamara missing practice with a knee injury again. So as Jamie said, Mark Ingram would be top 20, and we're going to look at that game a little bit later. Najee Harris was limited with a foot issue. We're not expecting that to be a big deal right now. But if you wanted to get ahead of it, who's the handcuff for Najee Harris?
Oh, puke. Probably Benny Snell.
I'd say Kalen Ballage. It would be a split.
Woohoo. Chris Godwin missed practice. We already talked about this with Tyler Johnson. James Robinson did practice, so that's good. Dallas, tough break for them. Randy Gregory, pass rusher for them. He's on IR with the calf injury. He'll miss at least 3 games. Michael Gallup is going to play this week against the Falcons. Excellent. AJ Green is back. Did you know that AJ Green is averaging the most yards per target of his career? Is that wild? And the second highest yards per catch. I couldn't believe it.
That's delightful.
Yeah. So if Hopkins is out and Green is back, which he will be, I think it's pretty interesting. Right.
I still look at him as a touchdown needy wide receiver. I think his chances of getting one of those goes up considerably if Hopkins doesn't play.
Well, it's also who's the quarterback.
Yeah, obviously it's got to be Kyler for you to feel confident in AJ Green. Okay, speaking of which, Kyler Murray has not practiced. He spoke earlier in the week about being optimistic, but still, he and Hopkins, we just don't know. Rondale Moore also in the concussion protocol. Sean McDermott, he really wants the Bills to run the football. I don't know that they can, but he wants them to.
Mentioned that after the loss against Jacksonville, that they need
this
to
week.
run the run game. But they also said that during the offseason. They said that at points last season. So I don't know if I'm buying into Buffalo suddenly force-feeding Moss and Singletary 20 carries between them.
Okay, and if it's Moss and Singletary, that's obviously going to be a headache. And if it's just Singletary, then you'll have a guy you're confident in starting.
Yep.
Julio Jones has a hamstring issue, so he may not play. And if he does, I just don't see how you can start Julio Jones. The Broncos are likely going to be without 3 starting offensive linemen. And they played a lot of last week without 3 starting offensive linemen, and they did quite well. But does that matter to you guys?
They're beat up badly on both sides of the ball. It's not just the offensive line. They're missing Bradley Chubb. Everybody knows that they traded away Von Miller. They're missing 2 of their top cornerbacks. They're a mess. And about their linebacker issues. So this is a team that got beat up badly and still found a way to win last week against Dallas. I don't know if I can buy into them doing the same thing, just absolutely routing Philadelphia.
Okay, we are going to talk about that game, but from a fantasy perspective, being without 3 starting offensive linemen, including their left tackle, does that get you kind of to avoid basically every Bronco if you can?
No, I don't think you get away from Melvin Gordon with what he's shown you.
Okay.
Nope. Bridgewater still a streaming quarterback. Judy is still someone that we want to call a number 2 wide receiver, but it's safer to call him a number 3. Javonte Williams has upside. Everybody else you can get away from.
Yeah, this is going to be Judy's breakout game.
Hope so.
Man, I hope so.
Rob Gronkowski will be back to normal in 2 to 3 weeks, according to Bruce Arians.
Put him on IR.
You mean physically or mentally? Because he's kind of, wild and fun.
Yeah.
I don't want him to get normal mentally.
Minnesota offensive coordinator Clint Kubiak said Justin Jefferson should have had more targets in week 9. Oh, that's the squeaky wheel. Yeah, squeaky wheel game. Here we go. Jefferson, give him 12 targets. Squeaky crickets. David Bakhtiari was limited for the Packers, starting left tackle. He's been out all year.
That's really good for them to get Bakhtiari.
And 2 players on defense have been limited in practice for them, and that's big. Eric Stokes and Kenny Clark. So important players for them.
Stokes was the guy replacing Jair Alexander. He had been doing an okay job. This is the Packers defensive scheme has done really well this year, especially in limiting big play receivers.
Yeah, I think that game is interesting because both the Packers and the Seahawks have been playing better defensive late. You look at their schedule. What do we make of it? We'll get into that in a little bit. Jamal Williams missed practice. And do you expect the following players? Zach Moss.
At this point, yes.
Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
No.
Not
Damian
yet.
Harris. Damian Harris?
We're not expecting Damian Harris.
Okay. We're optimistic about Stevenson now.
Where did you see something on Stevenson?
I saw it on my phone this morning. It was just...
I was told on a Boston radio show on Thursday that he was closer to being ready to play than Damian Harris. That was the word around New England.
Yeah, it's one of those apps that aggregates the tweets. Stevenson to practice, looking good for week 10.
Okay.
And Logan Thomas. How about Chris Carson and Logan Thomas?
I think Carson's got a shot. Thomas, I don't know if Thomas has even been practicing. I know he's still on IR.
He practiced Monday. I don't know what he did yesterday, but when he came out of Monday's practice, because remember they're on a bye, so they're able to practice on Monday, he said he was sore. So we'll see.
Yeah, I think he's been working off to the side. I'm not expecting Logan Thomas right now. I have him in one league, and I do not think I will be using him.
Or Baby Seals Jones.
Or who? Oh,
Baby Seals Jones.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the worst. The Tampa Bay, not so good against tight ends. And again, that is another game we will be previewing here. All right, so I want to tell you about something I will be
a couple other things, Adam, quickly.
All right.
Dawson Knox practiced in full.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems like he's back, and T.Y. Hilton practiced in full.
Great. T.Y. Hilton's part of Beat the Waiver Wire. Now, listen. Big Wireless has been ripping people off for years. There is finally a better option. Mint Mobile is the affordable premium wireless service that you buy online, starting at just $15 a month. By cutting out retail stores, Mint Mobile got rid of the crazy overhead costs so that you could score sweet savings every month. To get your new wireless phone plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/FFT. That is mintmobile.com/FFT. This is great stuff, okay? How much is your cell phone bill? You want it to be $15 a month? Mintmobile.com/FFT. All right. Beat the waiver wire. Guys, we're way behind, so I think some players... No, but this time we had the Beckham news and the Cam news, so... Deontay Foreman, Eno Benjamin, you could take a shot on them, see what happens this week, see if they start earning a role that's somewhat valuable. I think Marquis Valdes-Scantling is kind of interesting. You know, we haven't seen a lot of him with Aaron Rodgers because he was hurt and then Rodgers didn't play last week. So,
but it's the same thing with him every single game.
You like him more than Lazard as a Beat the Waiver Wire guy?
I do. I think so. I mean, yes, I do. Do you?
I mean, Lazard has scored in 3 straight games, 2 of those with Rodgers. So, hopefully it starts to, click for him. I would take a chance more on him than I would Valdes-Scantling. Now, that's obviously more of a floor play. The ceiling play is Valdes-Scantling, so it just depends on what you need. I would imagine that if things go the way that they would like them to go, we don't need a Beckham game comes from one of those guys.
T.Y. Hilton is another guy I'd look at. He is 46% rostered. And these are not week 11 specific. These are just players that might help you out down the stretch. Darnell Mooney's another guy. He's 51% rostered.
Fields too.
Yeah, Fields. Now they have Baltimore when they come back, but Baltimore's defense really
doesn't matter anymore.
Good.
What about Allen Robinson? What's his rostership right now?
He was in the 70s when I said to drop him. He could be in the 50s. I still wouldn't pick him up.
I might pick him up. I wonder if with Fields turning the corner and seemingly going in the right direction, that Robinson can start to pick up some steam.
It'd be nice to see.
72% roster for Robinson. Yeah, I did have Justin Fields on here. I don't know how you guys feel about any Giants wide receivers, but they're all pretty much available. They got the Bucks on the road next week. Defenses.
Who's healthy?
Daniel Jones is healthy, and that means that they're all going to.
I think they're all going to play next week, except maybe Shepard.
Right.
So San Francisco at Jacksonville, Washington at Carolina against Washington, and Cleveland at against Detroit. Cleveland at home against Detroit. Cleveland 68% rostered. I think I'm using them this week in one league and against the Patriots, so you can keep them for that second week against Detroit. And that's it. Let's go to the start-o-meter here. Knock out the games that we're getting to late in the show.
You didn't mention Elijah Moore also, just in case gets the Dolphins next week.
Good one.
We'll see.
If there's any others that pop in your head, fire away. Okay, start-o-meter. The last 3 games we're talking about Rams and 49ers. So Robert Woods, 0 to 10.
$1 billion.
Okay. How about Van Jefferson?
Like a 2.
We got to see if Beckham could play this game.
Okay, I was assuming he wasn't.
I would assume he's not also, but it's a Monday game, so you never know.
All right. So probably not going to start Jefferson, I guess. How about Tyler Higbee, 0 to 10?
6.
Jimmy Garoppolo, 300-yard games in 2 straight games for the first time in 5 seasons. Jimmy Garoppolo.
2.
4.
Eli Mitchell.
10.
8.
Okay. Deebo Samuel.
10.
9.
Brandon Ayuk.
7.
6.
George Kittle.
10.
10.
Atlanta and Dallas. Matt Ryan.
9.
8.
Interesting. Okay. Mike Davis.
2.
Negative W.
Would you go with Gage or Tajay Sharp?
Gage.
I have Gage higher in PPR. I might have Sharp higher in non. Sharp's been playing more.
Amari Cooper.
7.
10.
Okay. Amari Cooper. 2 games all year with more than 16 PPR fantasy points. It's not very good. And Dalton Schultz. Oh, wait. Michael Gallup.
3.
Gallup is 4. Schultz is a 5.
6 on Schultz.
Okay. Carolina and Arizona. DJ Moore.
6.7.
7.
So you'd start Cooper over Moore?
Yes.
I will.
How about, oh, man, Kyler Murray, if he plays?
7.
6.
Christian Kirk.
6.
7 if Hopkins plays. If Hopkins doesn't play. 6 if he does play. 5 if he does play.
AJ Green, if Hopkins does not play.
Same.
6.
Kirk or Green?
Kirk.
Ertz, 0 to 10.
4.
5.
Let's rock and roll. Philadelphia at Denver. Stat of the game. A tight end has 89 yards or a touchdown in 5 straight games against the Philadelphia Eagles, which is very weird because in their first 4 games, I want to say, they held Kyle Pitts, Travis Kelce, and George Kittle to 4 catches for 31 or fewer yards and no touchdowns. They look like the best team ever against tight ends, and now they are the worst team ever.
Is that the game Kittle got hurt?
I don't know.
It was week 2, right? Let me see.
No, then he didn't get hurt in that game.
He played week 3?
I think he played into week 4. He definitely played week 3. I think he played the first 4 weeks. So
was that
no,
the game that Garoppolo got hurt.
Nope, that was week 4 also.
All right. Yeah, Kittle played through week 4.
Yeah. So anyway, Noah Fant or Dallas Goedert, who do you like in this game?
Fant.
I'll take Goddard.
Okay. Jalen Hurts, starter sit.
I don't mind him. Low end
All right.
starter. We've seen the Broncos give up 20 or more fantasy points to 4 of 6 quarterbacks. I talked about how their defense is beat up right now. One of the reasons why I think they did a great job against Dak and the Cowboys, well, 1 was because Dak was off target. 2 was because the offensive line didn't have Tyron Smith. Tyron, right?
Tyron Smith, yeah.
I don't know why I blanked on that, but I did. But that's a really good player whose name I forgot.
Heard of him?
The left tackle was abused by the Broncos in the game. I think Philadelphia's offensive line will be in a little bit better shape to protect Jalen Hurts. And I think they'll throw a little bit more than they have. I think they might need to. But they're 1-2 in the games where they've been running like crazy. Their 1 win was against Detroit. I think they've got to try and let Jalen Hurts throw a little bit more.
But you said that yesterday. They're 2-4 in the games where they let Jalen Hurts throw more.
Right, but those are the games where Jalen Hurts was throwing like crazy and they weren't running the ball at all. I'm thinking that instead of being like, I don't know exactly what they've been pass run ratio wise, but it's probably been close to like 60-40 run. I'm thinking they get back to it at least 50-50, if not 55-45. They need to find that balance. I think Hurts will be okay.
Oh, I think it's been a lot more than 60-40, I'm guessing, because Jalen Hurts is averaging 15.5.
I'll give you the exact
15.5 pass attempts per game in his last 2 games. So have the running backs combined for 30. I'm pretty sure they've had more than 30 carries each of the last 2 games. Howard, Scott, and Gage.
Well, they definitely did against Detroit.
Definitely did against Detroit.
Yeah.
It was 29, I think, against. No, it was 30. No, it's 31.
When against Detroit?
against the Chargers?
Something against Detroit and 29 last week.
29? Well, no, because
what it was over the last 3 weeks.
Oh, right. It is 29. My bad. All right. Anyway, would you start Jalen Hurts or Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers?
Rodgers by a mile, and Wilson's one spot ahead for me.
I've got Hurts ahead of Wilson, but I've got Rodgers ahead of both.
Matt Ryan or Jalen Hurts?
That's one I'm struggling with. I have right now Hurts at 11 and Ryan at 12, but I could certainly talk myself into Ryan better than Hurts.
The last 3 weeks, Philadelphia has been 56% run, 44% pass.
Yeah, but what about the last 2 weeks?
Jeez, Adam.
I think that's more like 66 to 33. Tyron Smith. All right, how about why are you guys so low on Jordan Howard? You have him outside your top 24, even in non-PPR, coming off a 17-carry game, 3 touchdowns in his last 2 games. Jamie, why no love for Jordan Howard?
I'm just concerned if he does not score, because he's not involved in the passing game at all, and they're still going to use Boston Scott and to whatever extent Kenneth Gainwell. And I think we saw last week that this Broncos run defense, despite their injuries, and I do think the addition of Kenny Young at the linebacker spot has made a difference for them. Their run defense was better.
Yep.
I mean, it was it that because they just didn't. The Cowboys just didn't run the ball. You know, I mean, they didn't really,
part of it, but when they did run the ball, how effective were they?
I mean, Zeke was 10 carries for 51 yards. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yes, but that's also factoring in Zeke versus Jordan Howard.
Well, yeah, it's an injured Zeke with no Tyron Smith for what that's worth. But okay, in their last 5 games, they're giving up 4.8 yards per carry to running backs. I mean, they've been horrible.
Yeah, but you're going back when their linebacking core was just completely.
I don't know that bringing in a guy who the Rams gave away.
Their last 2 games, they were better though.
And it's not just Kenny Young. Baron Browning's been back. Like they've been better at stopping the run.
Washington game, they got better. The Cowboys game, they got better. It's basically since the Browns game.
And okay, last 2 games, 64% run, 36% pass for Philadelphia. I'm thinking there's no way that they stay at that type of rate against Denver.
I mean, the only way that it happens is if they're playing with a lead.
So who is the best running back in this game?
Gordon.
Melvin Gordon is the best.
And Javonte's better than Jordan Howard too.
Okay, yeah. Who's the second best? Javonte. Okay. Who's the best wide receiver in this game?
Judy.
I think I might have Devontae Smith ranked the highest. I'm going to double check.
You are by far the highest on Devontae Smith. You have him in your top 24.
I think I was last week too. And it's just continuing on with my philosophy here that they're going to throw more than run.
Look, again, this is like, it's kind of like DJ Moore's. I have a lot of Devontae Smith. And I think I'm starting him everywhere, but I'm nervous, because he just hasn't really been that good. And then last week he was awesome. And then I just worry that he's the kind of player he's going to be a fool you player. But I guess he's at least the number 3 receiver. You start him over Sutton?
Sure, at least the number 3.
Start him over Sutton?
Easily.
Yes.
Okay. Goddard and Fant are both starts in this game. Dave likes Goddard better, and Jamie likes Fant better. Denver, they have been very good against tight ends. Some of that's competition, but Waller had 65 for 67. Andrews had 5 for 67. Waller had 5 for 59. Schultz had 4 for 54. That's what the must-start tight ends have been, right around 50 to 60 yards, 4 or 5 catches, and they haven't given up a lot of touchdowns. Any interest in Teddy Bridgewater this week? He has scored 22 to 25 fantasy points, and I want to say 5 of 6 healthy games. Maybe it's 5 of 7 healthy games. Don't remember.
Yeah, he's been okay. He's a good streaming quarterback, good bye week replacement. All right. Philly's allowed 21 plus to 6 of the last 8 quarterbacks they've faced.
So let's talk about Melvin Gordon, since if he's your favorite running back in this game, if Zach Moss plays, would you start Melvin Gordon over the Bills guys?
Yes.
Yep.
Would you start Melvin Gordon or Devontae Smith?
Gordon.
Smith.
Okay. Philadelphia gives up the 8th most points to running backs. And Jerry Judy is a start. Noah Fant is a start. Denver DST is a borderline start. And we will compare those guys as we get further into the show. Right now, would you start Jerry Judy or Tyler Lockett?
Locket. Love Locket this week.
Why?
Russ is back, man. This is going to be all systems go. Shots down the field all over the place.
I think there's more upside with Lockett, obviously, than there is with Judy. So I'll agree. I'll say that Lockett over Judy. They're close in my rankings. I do wonder a little bit about whether or not Russ in his first game back can spike this Packers defense. They've legitimately been doing well with the scheme that they're playing.
Fantastic.
Yeah. I've got a Seahawks stack on FanDuel, and it's really a gamble. And by the way, we're on to Seattle, Green Bay right now, because Green Bay, they're giving up 16 points per game in their last 6 games. But, who have they faced? Pittsburgh gave up 22 points at Cincinnati in an overtime game. I think that was really impressive. The Bears, Washington, at Arizona, basically without DeAndre Hopkins, and then at Kansas City last week, basically without, with the as everybody's been saying, the Monstars have stolen the Kansas City Chiefs' powers. So, I was very impressed with the Packers last week, but then again, the Chiefs are making everyone look good right now. So my point is, I don't know just how good they are. One thing that scares me, this is why I really think it's a risk to go and DFS with a Seahawks slate. They are dead last in the NFL in time of possession. They averaged less than 26 minutes per game. Lately, it's been more like 28 minutes per game. But the Packers are great in time of possession, and they're one of the slowest teams in the NFL. So you might not get a lot of plays from the Seahawks. Combine that with they're playing a hot defense. No way you're sitting Metcalf. But Jamie, I guess I want to press you a little bit on your confidence in Tyler Lockett.
Yeah, like I said, it's it's more hope than anything I could sit here and tell you, because we know what Tyler Lockett is. If he's not getting targets and making plays down the field, he's going to be a little bit of a frustrating player. But I think they're going to give him those opportunities. I want to see Kenny Clark play. I want to see Stokes play. Those are 2 big pieces to this team that's already down Alexander and Zadarius Smith. And so, while their scheme has been good, you mentioned it, some of the opponents, and for what it's worth, Kyler wasn't 100% in that game with the hand injury and then the ankle injury at the end. So I guess this is me channeling Heath Cummings. I'll take my chances with Tyler Lockett more times than not. And I do think that Russ coming back is going to be big for this passing attack.
I wonder if there's any carryover from the target volume from their last game, where maybe just something resonated with the coaching staff. Hey, Tyler Lockett's a great player. He's got great speed. He runs great routes. Why aren't we throwing to him more? Now, it's weird if they realize this now after he's been with the team his entire career, that they decided to throw him the ball more. Maybe that was just a byproduct of their amazing matchup. But I can't add anything that you haven't said already, Jamie. You know what you're getting with Tyler Lockett. The only thing I can add is that Green Bay plays a lot of heavy zone defense. It's one of the reasons why they did well against Tyreek Hill last week. It's one of the reasons why they've been doing well against pretty much everybody. Lockett has 8 catches this year of 10-plus air yards versus zone coverage with 1 touchdown. He has 4 catches of 10-plus air yards versus man coverage this year with 2 touchdowns. The difference between the two is that 77% of his targets have come against zone. So it almost sounds what I'm trying to get across is that if he's playing against the zone coverage, it lowers his chances of having a lot of those big plays that you almost need to get from Tyler Lockett. Can he still get them against zone? Of course, he did it in week 1. But it's still an issue that would keep me from saying Lockett's a must start. Got to get him in your lineup. Top 15 type of receiver. Can he get there? Of course. But he's also just as capable of being somebody that lets you down. I think that's why I've got him ranked right around 24th overall against wide receiver. I'm kind of couching it, saying that you know what you can get with him. That's why you start him. I don't have enough evidence to say you shouldn't start him.
Okay. As far as, the top wide receivers to face Green Bay, Jamar Chase, Deontay Johnson, Terry McLaurin, they had huge.
Those are the best 3. But everybody else has been kind of crappy.
Right. But when we talk about everybody else, there have been 2 must-start guys that they have really done a great job against. Deebo Samuel, 5 for 52 on 10 targets, and Tyreek Hill last week, 37 yards on 11 targets. Then there's DeAndre Hopkins. I'm not really including him. He had 2 catches for 66 yards. Remember the big catch? He barely played. He was hurt. So I'd say mixed results against great receivers, which, a lot of teams are horrible against great receivers. So that's not so bad. Sit the tight ends in this game. Oh, Seattle running
How
backs.
dare you disgrace DeGuara like that?
Let's talk about the Seattle running backs here. How do you play it? If Carson's in, how do you play it? If Carson's out, Jamie, how do you play it?
If Carson's in, he's a borderline starter. I don't love the situation for him because I don't know how much he'll share with Alex Collins. If Collins even plays, I mean, he's still dealing with this groin injury. If Carson is out, I think it's almost better for fantasy managers because at least you don't have to force Carson into your lineup. And Collins, you can try to treat as a flex at best for me. This is part of the reason why I like Lockett and Metcalf. I think it's going to be all about Russell Wilson this game. So I don't think it's going to be a very heavy run scenario for Seattle, and I just don't love the setup for both those guys.
Do you like A.J. Dillon better than them?
I would like A.J. Dillon better than Collins if Carson plays, but I would start the starter for Seattle over A.J. Dillon.
Right. All right, Aaron Jones coming off a bad game without Aaron Rodgers, but he catches a lot of balls with Aaron Rodgers, and there have been eight running backs with 40 or more receiving yards against the Seahawks. So don't worry about Aaron Jones. Get him in your lineup. All right. You guys differ on Rodgers a little bit. I wish Heath were here because Heath has Rodgers 13th, but you guys have him in your top 8. Jamie has him 5th, and whatever. Just start Aaron Rodgers. He's awesome. And he's weeks 2 through 7. That's getting rid of week 1, getting rid of the game he didn't have Adams.
A's or stats.
Yep, totally. On pace for 4,200 yards, 40 touchdowns, 3 interceptions per 16 games.
What's his pace even with those games?
I do not know. I don't know. Sorry.
I mean, is it that far off of what you just said?
I would think it is. 4,240 is the pace I gave. I'm going to guess it's more like 38.50 and 33. Go ahead. You tell me.
Well, let me know. I'll let you know. I'll let
Jamie,
somebody know.
Would you start any wide receiver other than Davante Adams for the Packers?
No, like you said, if you want to speculate on MVS, you want to speculate on Allen Lazard, it's certainly worth doing. And one of those guys, along with probably Randall Cobb, will make a play or two that you'll say, why didn't I pick this guy up? And why didn't I potentially start him? Why didn't I use him in DFS? But I think we know what this Packers offense is for the majority of the season. It's a lot of Davante Adams coming up, a lot of Aaron Jones coming up, and we'll sprinkle in AJ Dillon as well. No, I would play Mahomes over Russell Wilson.
Blake wants to know if you'd play Mahomes or Wilson. Who would you play?
Mahomes.
Okay. Go ahead, Dave.
37.88 is the 16-game pace for his entirety. 34 touchdowns, 6 interceptions.
I was pretty close. I said 38.50, 33 touchdowns.
Right. If you include his rushing touchdowns, he's on pace for 4 of those.
Okay.
So pretty good year either way. But when you Azer statted it.
No, that's really 38 to be on pace for 3,800 yards in 16 games. That's not good. For Aaron Rodgers, that's terrible.
Right, but 38 touchdowns, no one's going to sneeze at.
And people overlook the lack of interceptions and how valuable that is. It's a big part. It's a sneaky part of his value. So Tampa Bay at Washington, stat of the game. If you're looking at Tyler Johnson, if he's the second guy, we think he'd be the second guy. The Washington football team has played 8 games. In 5 of them, 2 receivers, multiple receivers, at least 2, have scored 14 or more PPR fantasy points. And Kansas City had 2 receivers score 13 or more, or about 13.5. So you've gotten, a start-worthy game from a number 2 receiver in 6 out of 8 games. Not necessarily a great game, but 13, 14 or more PPR fantasy points.
It'll be interesting if Scotty Miller plays. He's hoping to return for this matchup as well. So that could throw a little bit of a wrench into Tyler Johnson. And then you got to factor in, is OJ Howard more involved? Is Cameron Brate more involved? Is Darren Fells more involved? Because no Gronk and no Antonio Brown and potentially no Chris Godwin. So, but Tyler Johnson's got a chance. In the last game that they played, he scored 11 PPR points. So you saw an uptick in playing time without Antonio Brown on the field. So hopefully that's something to, build off of. There's just a lot to like about the opportunity for him. And if this is going to be, maybe multiple weeks for Chris Godwin, which, hopefully is not the case, but, you should get ahead of it now and pick up Tyler Johnson. Like I picked him up in almost every league he was available. Just to see what happens.
Okay, let's start with Washington here. Taylor Heineke is basically a sit for you guys. He's been really bad lately. And Tampa Bay getting a little bit healthier in the secondary as well. The Washington running backs, who's your favorite in non-PPR? Who's your favorite in full PPR?
I'll settle on Gibson in non-PPR. It's McKissick far and away in full PPR.
And how much do you like J.D. McKissic? 6 running backs have at least 4 catches. 5 running backs have 5 or more catches against, you can see the case for McKissic, but that's against Tampa Bay. How much do you like J.D. McKissic this week?
Top 24 running back in PPR.
Yep. Great DFS play too.
Melvin Gordon or J.D. McKissic?
Gordon.
Gordon in non-PPR. I might go McKissic in PPR.
DJ Moore or J.D. McKissic?
More in non-PPR. Make me think maybe McKissic in
PPR. I think he ends up playing the most. I think he gets plenty of targets. We know that Tampa Bay doesn't see a lot of running back rushes per game. They're the lowest in the league. It's around 15 per game. Wouldn't be surprised if Gibson had 10 carries and 1 or 2 catches, and McKissic picks up a lot of work in the second half.
And by the way, Jarrett Patterson, 6% rostered, another guy that you might want to stash if you have an empty roster.
Good stash. And as for McLaurin, this Bucs defense hasn't allowed a touchdown or 100 yards to a wide receiver in 5 straight games. They're starting to play much better against the pass.
I know. You do have to consider the opponents, right?
It's 100%.
Well, I don't know if it's 100%.
It's Washington now. I forgot.
Well, it's Terry McLaurin. They faced New England, Miami, Philadelphia.
I hope Terry McLaurin's better than the Saints guys, than the Bears guys, including what we've seen now from Allen Robinson, the Eagles guys, the Dolphins guys, the Patriots guys. You go back to the Rams game when they faced a player of his caliber, and they got beat up by Cooper Kupp. They got beat up by Deshaun Jackson. So I think we're going to see Terry McLaurin have a good enough game.
Don't get me wrong. I still have him ranked as a top 24 receiver, but he's not top 12 for me.
Yeah, he's top 10 for me.
Yeah, I know you guys are pretty different. It's kind of like Lockett, I think. But I think, to be fair, McLaurin has basically been Tyler Lockett this year. He has 3 huge games, and he has 5 games with 11 or fewer PPR fantasy points. It's really frustrating. But he's a start. And are you starting the Washington tight end? Tampa Bay, I would say they struggle against tight ends. They're not terrible, but they struggle.
Low end.
I would prefer to avoid it, but if Thomas plays, he's a low-end starter.
Right.
They're borderline terrible, actually, against tight ends. They're really not good.
They've been good the last 3 games. They've held tight ends to 8 or fewer half PPR points.
What's this half PPR? Doing half PPR? Throwing
PPR. Half PPR. Just because it's in the middle.
Okay. But Ertz scored a touchdown. Like Cole Kmet had 43 yards. It's kind of a lot for him. Tom Brady.
That's low for him now.
Are you worried about Tom Brady with only Mike Evans, basically?
I think you're still starting Tom Brady. You probably lower expectations a little bit. Might only get you 25 fantasy points instead of 30.
Okay.
If he was playing anybody else, then yeah, I'd be concerned. But this team's so bad.
Most fantasy points allowed to wide receivers or to quarterbacks, and close in wide receivers.
If Chris Godwin doesn't play, I might make Mike Evans number 1.
He's already top 3 for me.
Leonard Fournette is behind James Conner, right?
Yes.
Okay. Fournette he's top 15. He's not top 10, but he's close. Leonard Fournette or Dearness Johnson, if Chubb's out.
Fournette.
Fournette, but it's close in non-PPR.
This is actually a pretty tough matchup. They have a very good run defense, 3.5 yards per carry to running backs, and Fournette has basically only faced good match. He's only done well against good matchups, and he faced the Saints and he was terrible. But this is not exactly the Saints. So something to keep in mind. I'm probably not going to DFS Leonard Fournette, but he has a good chance to score always.
Yeah, I agree with that, but especially with all the receivers that they're down, it might make Bruce Arians and Byron Leftwich tell Tom Brady, hand off a little bit more. Let's
also
just get out of here.
Make Giovanni Bernard a good sleeper this week too.
Yeah, and of course Fournette has 9 targets over his last 2 games, which is kind of low for him. I mean, he's pretty involved. All right, OJ Howard, 4% rostered. Do you think if Chris Godwin is out, OJ Howard is a start-worthy tight end?
Streamable
leagues, like Scott Fishbowl, for example, those type of formats. You're desperate at tight end, sure, but the last time we thought Howard was going to be good, Cameron Brate was the guy that they focused on. So it's just so hard to tell what they're going to do.
All right, and we talked.
He's 2,700 on DraftKings, so if he gets you 8 PPR points, which isn't a slam dunk, he basically needs to score. But in a tournament, you could start him.
Tampa Bay's DST is 4th for everyone. And just seeing now, quick update. Will Fuller may play next week. So that's terrific. All right, we're going to take a quick break on that Will Fuller note. When we come back, Rams and 49ers. Can the 49ers put up some points on this Rams defense? We will be right back. Let's talk about the Rams and the 49ers. This game in San Francisco. Big game for San Francisco. They got to figure out if they're, alive in that wild card race, because it's going to matter maybe for the Garoppolo versus Lance debate, which is fantasy relevant, of course.
Versus jobs for John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan too, potentially.
Yeah. It's weird. It's been kind of an underwhelming tenure, except for one amazing year. The stat of the game, Jimmy Garoppolo, I mentioned this earlier, 300 yards in back-to-back games for the first time since 2017. And they've thrown 40. They've lost 5 games this year. They've thrown 40 to 41 passes in 3 of those 5 losses. Now, the other 2 games, one was a Trey Lance start, and he ran the ball a lot. And the other game was the pouring rain. What was it called? The something bomb cyclone.
Oh, yeah.
Game against the Colts, where horrible conditions to throw the ball. My point is, you're getting a ton of pass volume in games that, if it goes the way it's expected to go, you might get 40 passes, and that's huge, obviously, for Debo, for Kittle, for Ayuk. So, Dave, why don't you start? Give me your thoughts on the 49ers passing game.
I think Debo Samuel and George Kittle are locked into the lineups at this point. You know what to expect from Kittle. Hopefully you get it. Debo, too, should still continue to see a decent amount of targets. I know last week was disappointing. Ayuk broke out. I can't help but wonder if Ayuk is the one that is the odd man out this week.
Well, Debo still had 9 targets last week, right? It's not like I know he didn't do much with it.
Didn't have an amazing fantasy game.
Ignored. Yeah. So
he also wasn't 100%. He's not on the injury report this week, so I wonder how much he was, dealing with calf injury. Look, this is going to be this type of offense now when everybody's healthy. Debo was thriving with Kittle not there, with Ayuk not playing well. If Ayuk is back to any extent of what he was last year, and last week's game to give you an indication that he's close to that, then he's going to lose a little bit. So, maybe he's not a top 10 receiver anymore, but you're still starting him. And Ayuk should give you some semblance of hope as a number 3 receiver. And obviously you're going to start Kittle. So yeah, Garoppolo's certainly got a chance. It's just a matter of, can he take advantage of this defense, which should have Von Miller on the field now. And so, how much of a problem is that going to be for them?
It's going to be a problem. They're without their right tackle for the rest of the way. They're starting right tackle, Michael.
But Williams is back, right? He's healthy.
I think so.
Back, yeah.
That'll help for as long as he stays healthy.
All right, so I was more asking about Ayuk and Debo. I didn't think everyone who has Kittle was probably going to start Kittle. Let me knock out Kittle real quick. If you picked up a streamer, is there anyone, is there a Dalton Schultz or Dallas Goedert or something? Are you starting over George Kittle? Okay.
Nope.
So in terms of Debo is still a must start?
Yes.
Okay.
Number 2 receiver.
What about Ayuk?
Decent flex.
Look, again, I'll keep saying this. Most leagues are 3 receiver leagues. He's starting for you.
He's behind, I would guess, Robert Woods.
He's not a starter in a 2 receiver league, but in a 3 receiver league, he should be in your lineup. Yes, behind Robert Woods.
Yeah,
okay.
Behind
Cole Beasley or Ayuk?
Beasley for me, but I can certainly see Ayuk better in non-PPR.
Brandon Ayuk or Zach Moss if he plays, obviously.
Ayuk in PPR.
Jordan Howard or Brandon Ayuk?
Ayuk.
Take my chances with Ayuk. I'd start Ayuk over Sutton. I'd start him over Landry. I'd start him over Elijah Moore. I'd start him over AJ Green, even if DeAndre Hopkins does not play.
Yeah, I'm with you. Over every Cardinals player, over every Broncos not named Judy, over every Jets receiver, over every Browns receiver.
All right. For the Rams.
Every Patriots receiver.
Straightforward stuff for the Rams.
Every Jaguars receiver.
Kind of like Marvin Moore.
Oh, interesting. Straightforward stuff for the Rams. Guys, it's just Rams start them. Except Higbee.
Yeah,
Higbee.
I mean, look, Higbee's, the thing with Higbee is, and he had, I think, a good way of breaking this down yesterday when we were talking of start sets, that Higbee is kind of goes against everything if you're a true stat guy. Like if you're going against opportunity, red zone opportunity, playing time, I mean, he gets it all, and he's not doing anything with it. And so it's an interesting matchup. The 49ers, I think, are top 5 in fantasy points allowed to tight ends. So They've clearly done a good job against the position. But at one of these weeks, he's going to have a big game. He only has one good game against them in his last 5 meetings, and it was the stretch when he was awesome. So otherwise, he's just been kind of nondescript against the 49ers. So I don't want to start him. Like, I would start Dan Arnold over him. I would start Logan Thomas if he plays over him. Obviously, Dalton Schultz and Dallas Goedert and those guys. But I don't think I'm going to necessarily make a significant transaction on my roster to have to drop somebody else to carry 2 tight ends unless I'm just dropping Higbee for one of those guys.
I will never forget the winter of Higbee. Niners have allowed at least 9.5 half PPR fantasy points to a tight end in 2 of their last 3 touchdowns to the road dog, Jesse James, and Mo Alley Cox. And Higbee should have had a good game last week. He had a touchdown called off the board because he stepped out of bounds, the knucklehead. So hopefully they find him in the end zone again this week. And this time, both feet inbounds, Tyler. Inbounds.
All right. What is your thought? Let's finish up on this game here. Your thoughts on Elijah Mitchell. Your guys are lower on him than Heath is, but you still have him as a top 20 guy. And what is the deal with Jermichael Hasty?
Did not practice yesterday, so not a good sign, which is a help for Mitchell.
Yeah.
Because as we saw, the role in the passing game was nice. But this is a tough defense for them. I mean, this is going to be a defense that challenges them and challenges how great they run the ball. So I don't think you're benching Mitchell, but I would just lower the ceiling for Mitchell.
Okay. All right. There have been 4 running backs with 15 to 18 carries against the Rams. And Montgomery had 100 yards in week 1. The others have been around 50 yards. That was Jonathan Taylor, James Conner, and Alex Collins. They had 47 to 51 yards. So you got to hope if he gets those 15 to 18 carries, you got to hope that he can outperform that or maybe score. You get a lot of touchdowns.
If Hasty's out, I think Jeff Wilson gets a significant opportunity. He'll play at least a third of the snaps.
All righty. Rams DST is top 5. Got 2 more games. Carolina at Arizona. Stat of the game number 1. First of all, I want to give some credit to James Conner because in a lot of people's minds, he's what he was the first half of the season, first quarter of the season, I guess. Not doing anything explosive, terrible yards per carry, just scoring. But in his last 4 games, he's averaging 4.9 yards per carry. He had a 16-yard carry. He had an 18-yard carry. He had a 35-yard carry all in his last 4 games. So he is hitting his stride. I don't know what the difference is, but he's not what he was in the first 5 games where he was just a plotter, lucky to score. Good stuff there. That's that of the game number 1.
Houston 3 games ago and averaged 6 yards per carry there. And he had 21 carries for 96 yards in a blowout last week, and he was averaging, that's 4.6 yards per carry.
Yeah, but it's 4 games in a row. He's averaging 4 something per carry.
Yes, that's true. But one of those games, he was 5 for 22. One of those games, I mean, it's 4.4. You're getting your yards per carry, but the volume was absolutely last week, and that's what's going to continue this week.
Yeah. All right. I know you guys love James Conner. Must start guy. Stat of the game number 2, and this is about DJ Moore. A.J. Brown. This is wide receivers against Arizona. A.J. Brown, Julio Jones, Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, all of the Jaguars, Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp, Brandon Cooks, Deebo Samuel, 65 or fewer yards. All of them. 5 of them did score, but all of those great receivers for the most part, 65 or fewer yards. As I mentioned, Arizona, very good against number 1s, pretty bad against everyone else, but I don't know if there's anything. Let's just sum it up. Jamie, DJ Moore, we've talked so much about him this week, but your final thoughts.
I think he's a borderline starter. It's in a 2 receiver league. He's obviously starting in a 3 receiver league. It's a hope that PJ Walker is going to get him going. It's a hope that McCaffrey, again, back on the field, the normal Christian McCaffrey, not the one we saw last week, which was a shake the rust off game, not playing full allotment of snaps, that there's the threat of what he can do. So I think if you have somebody that you really love, Cole Beasley in PPR, for example, would be one. Hunter Renfrow in PPR would be another. Jerry Judy, I would start over DJ Moore.
Christian Kirk?
Huh?
Christian Kirk?
No, just because I think with AJ Green back and most likely if it's a Colt McCoy or a banged up Kyler Murray, I wouldn't trust it as much. But there's no semblance of confidence with DJ Moore right now. I'm hoping that we get to next week and he's does something to still make you feel good, doesn't ruin your week, and then Cam comes in and Cam gets him going against a bad Washington defense.
Okay. Start James Conner, sit Benjamin, but let's see what his role is. He's 31% rostered. And yeah, you guys said you'd prefer Christian Kirk over AJ Green, but I also mentioned career high yards per target for AJ Green. So I think these guys are usable, right? If Kyler even if Kyler doesn't play, Christian Kirk had a great game last week. 6 catches for 91 yards on 6 targets.
Yeah, and that was in a blowout win where he could have had maybe more opportunities if they're chasing points.
Right. So I guess they're okay. They're okay, those guys, if whether or not Kyler plays, but obviously better.
Again, 3 receiver leagues they're starting for you.
All right. Starter sit Zach Ertz.
Don't feel great starting him.
And
I'd rather go with Higbee. Go with Arnold over both of them.
Okay.
He will be better than Mike Gesicki.
Which streamers would you start over Kyler Murray?
Wentz for sure. Ryan, if he's in that category. The one that I'm torn on is Derek Carr. But right now I have Murray one spot ahead.
Right now I only have Wentz ahead.
Just once. Okay. Our last game is Atlanta at Dallas. So yeah, Matt Ryan coming off a huge game, 31 points at New Orleans. He scored 7 points, I think, the week before that against Carolina, right? So why do you guys seem to have a pretty decent amount of confidence in Matt Ryan, Dave?
We've seen Dallas get beat deep by the deep ball last week. They've allowed 34 passes of 20-plus yards. That's 6th most, including 7 in the last 2 weeks. That's the 8th most. So this pass defense that we thought was getting better, maybe not necessarily so good at allowing those deep throws. You mentioned earlier that Randy Gregory is going to be out. So the pass rush back to being kind of a question mark. I still think they can be good with Micah Parsons there. But I still think that Matt Ryan is going to throw enough. That volume will help him. The fact that they can't run the ball worth a lick will help Matt Ryan find a way to close to 22 fantasy points.
My only concern, and it's a small one, but it's a concern, is the defensive coordinator for the Cowboys.
Yep, that's a good call.
Yeah. It's funny to think, man, he just doesn't have very good receivers right now. Well, Cordero Patterson is his number 1 receiver, and obviously Kyle Pitts. Patterson or James Conner?
Conner for me, but it's close. This game, if the Cowboys don't stop Matt Ryan, will be the highest scoring game of the week.
I hope so.
I like Patterson over Conner, PPR.
Okay. Mike Davis, starter sit.
Sit.
Cut.
Russell Gage is a number 4 receiver in non-border. Yeah, pretty much number 4 receiver both ways. Dallas, I guess it's Patterson, really. Somebody's got to produce on them. It's probably Patterson.
Well, it's Pitts.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm assuming it'll be Pitts. I think Dallas is just awful against tight ends. They're 21st, but I just think you look at the game log, they're just not good.
How are they against wide receivers?
Right, because he's not a tight end.
He's not. He is a hybrid. He is a true hybrid. Don't tell me he's not a tight end, and I won't tell you he's not a wide receiver, because he doesn't block, but in terms of where he lines up, he's not an X receiver. Fair?
Yes, and they are team hybrid.
By the way, I don't know for sure, but if we went back, I'm not sure that a linebacker covered Mike Gesicki once all night. I think it was a cornerback. Every time I looked, it was a cornerback.
Mon-Fri was on him a couple of times.
Yeah, it was a defensive back. All right, Dak is top 7. Start Zeke. I mean, all right, we know what to do with the Cowboys, but what about now with Gallup coming in? Your level of confidence, Jamie, and Cooper and Schultz and Lamb.
I mean, mostly the confidence is waning in Schultz, just because, I think that's the one who probably loses the most. But, we'll see in terms of his red zone targets, his red zone opportunities, how much they're going to throw Gallup out there right away, for this week in particular. But yeah, I think they're all going to lose to a certain extent. So, whereas, most weeks the hope is that they're borderline number 1 guys, they're probably back end number 2 guys this week if Gallup commands the same type of targets we saw in week 1.
Kyle Pitts is lined up in the slot 41% of the time, out wide 30% of the time. So you're right. He's not totally a wide receiver. About a quarter of the time he lines up as a tight end.
How much? What percentage? 30%?
28% of the time he lines up as a tight end.
So I want to give a little love to Dalton Schultz. I mean, he actually led the team in receiving last week, and it seemed like he had a bad game, but it's like nobody gets on Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper has been week 1, he was amazing. 2 weeks ago, I think he was amazing. He was great against the Vikings. Like I said, those are only 2 games of more than 16 PPR fantasy points. He's really been a letdown most weeks. And for reference, there are 18 wide receivers averaging more than 16 PPR fantasy, or 16 or more PPR fantasy points per game. And Cooper's gotten there twice this year. So I'm interested to see what happens here, but it's almost like a Terry McLaurin, DJ Moore kind of situation. You get a lot of disappointing games with Amari Cooper. We don't really talk about it much. I think the good thing is the days of them destroying opponents and throwing the ball 25 times probably over.
Hope so.
At least not going to be as normal.
Can I give the anti-Dalton Schultz argument?
Sure.
His playing time, his target rate has started to slide. It's down to 13.8% over his last 3 games. When he was a big-time breakout for Dallas, it was over 23%. That was weeks 2 through 5. He's had 12 or fewer PPR points in each of his last 3 games. Gallup, you said, is expected back. If Gallup plays, that's another target that I think Dak might prefer over Dalton Schultz. And this is a super small sample size. But in that first half against Tampa Bay, Gallup had 19% of the targets from Dak Prescott. Dalton Schultz had 6%.
Mm-hmm. I was going to criticize you for using the sample size, but I myself had it in the notes and was going to bring it up. Only 2 targets in the first half.
Yeah, he had a 15% target rate in the second half. Most or all of it coming after Gallup left.
I don't really think that.
And he's been pretty good against tight ends.
It's interesting.
Except he crushed him in week 7.
All right. So Dalton Schultz or Zach Ertz?
Schultz.
Ertz.
Dan Arnold or Dalton Schultz?
Dan.
Schultz.
Tyler Conklin or Dalton Schultz?
Schultz.
I have Schultz ranked higher for now. I think I'm going to change it to Conk.
Okay, Conk over Gronk this week. Thanks for listening, everybody. We will talk to you with the mailbag. Oh, that's right. We have the mailbag. Yeah, you know the schedule. I'm not going to give it out anymore. I'm going to go get
last night was Lamar Jackson's first red zone interception of his career.
No.
Oh, I didn't know that.
On the last play of the game, basically.
His career red zone stats, this is according to Jeff Kerr, who works for us at CBS. 723 yards, 57 touchdowns, 1 interception after last night. And 15 rushing touchdowns in the red zone.
Wow. He has had another, he's one of those players like some of the guys I mentioned. He's going to have great stats, but when you look at the game log, it's been 3 huge games and a lot of disappointment for Lamar Jackson. Have a great day, everybody. We'll talk to you on the mailbag. See ya.